All right, we're going to call the meeting to order. Colchester Planning Commission, it is 7:08. First thing is agenda considerations reserved for changes to the agenda items and order. We're going to go right in the same order tonight. We have comments and questions from the public not related to the agenda. All good? All right, let's get started. Request for supplement amendments to the Colchester Development Regulations. We'll start with SR 22-01. Send it to Kathy Ann. Do you want to start?
I'm sorry, I didn't set up a table. How do you want people to come and talk with you?
What's more comfortable, sit up here or talk at the mic, whichever works.
Sit at the corner if that works.
That would work.
Corner?
Absolutely.
I'm sorry about that.
We just need to, as you know, state your name.
Oh.
Yeah. Maybe not tonight.
David Burke, Larry Burke. I'm here for this on behalf of Jim Antel and Skip Farrell. High Point Center, you probably all know where it is, but if you're going south on Route 7, past Costco, underneath the interchange, it's the commercial property on the right-hand side. There we go. Commercial property on the right-hand side, just past the entrance into the quarry. Used to have Libby's Blue Line Diner on it, has the two larger commercial buildings on either side of that, and has one vacant, I think it's about a 0.92 acre footprint up behind the southernmost building. And this request started back in March of 2017. That's when I submitted for this. So 5 years later, I'm here. And at that time, the owners, even back in 2017, were experiencing issues as far as the commercial use, that just not the demand. Since COVID, the demand's really gone, and in my opinion, never coming back. There's just a glut of commercial properties, and I think that this request was reasonable when I made it, and I think it's much more reasonable now, given the likelihood of what's going to happen moving forward, period. So what they had asked me to look at back in 2017 was, can we do any residential out there? And I said, no, we can't do any. There's no permitted use, there's no conditional use for strict residential, your commercial zone. But then I looked into the regulations, and there's several items in the regulations as listed in my 2017 letter that are commercial. They're residential uses that are commercial in nature. So the request is not a zone change request. The staff report suggests it's a zone change request. It suggests that it's in conflict with the town plan, that it would require all kinds of time. I disagree on all accounts. All this is a request to add apartment building greater than 10 units and or multifamily building, which I assume either one of those is what's the GD3 district for Severance Corners is being used. Those uses, I'm asking that those get added to the existing zoning district as conditional uses. Conditional uses will allow more scrutiny by staff, by the board, by neighbors. So I don't think it's a big ask. And I think that if the town doesn't keep their eyes open, they're going to have a lot of commercial properties that may just continue to go downhill, because if you don't have people in them, you're not sinking money into them. They did have an architect look at upgrading. Did the cost to. They spent the cost to have an architect look at upgrading the building that was kind of, the second building might have been kind of modern when it was built. It's a lot of that reflective glass kind of, to see if that would generate interest. This was pre-COVID, and that didn't generate any interest, so they didn't sink the money into those upgrades. But I think it's pretty clear to me that that property and other properties will, go the downhill track. So the ask is, as I stated in the 2017 letter, it's not a zone change. It's a request that one and/or two uses be considered to be added as a conditional use to the existing zoning district. And I think that they're reasonably similar. It's commercial in nature. So in that district now, some of the conditional uses are halfway house, congregate housing, hotel motel, extended stay hotel, trade vocational schools, colleges, universities, community college, all which are residential, commercial in nature. And that's where my request is multi and/or apartments greater than 10. I think maybe the multi could go away because that could be confused with, I think it needs to be kind of the greater than 10 to be commercial in nature. But, so that's the request. And, like your consideration to have it move through the process to see if it has support.
What do you envision the building itself for the use? How, you talk about floors, style?
Well, as a conditional use, it would have to, come in, obviously. It would be subject to the conditional use criterion and that higher scrutiny. For the existing building, I think it would depend on, I'm not sure that there's a user in the existing building now, the second building. It was, the last time it was used at any capacity was when UVM had some space there. And that was close to 5 years ago that they exited. And so I could see that the main level would be the most attractive for the commercial use. And in that one building, the main level is, when I say the main level, I'm saying the main level from the back parking lot side, and maybe the lower level, but the lower level is a little difficult because it's underground on the back side. I would think the upper, I think that's one's 4 floors, I would think the upper 2 floors would be more conducive to residential. Haven't discussed any of that with these applicants. They don't have any, they haven't spent any time or resources other than on myself for this request. It's really just a matter of, so it's not even necessarily that with these owners that residential apartments greater than 10 will come, but it's just something when they're looking at vacant property for years on end, that it seems reasonable to them. And some of the stuff that they thought was reasonable, I did not think was reasonable, and that's why I limited this as a conditional use and kind of the commercial in nature like those other conditional uses.
Right. Does anybody have any questions for David? No?
Well, this is just the commercial zoning just for that area? Are we talking about?
I can't ask for any, I can only ask for
Oh, no, but if we're asking,
my applicant.
if you're asking for conditional use for commercial zoning, wouldn't that be across the board?
Correct.
For all commercial?
Yes.
Correct. That's where we run into
That's where we
problem.
need to take a look at it then.
Yeah. That's where we run into
I don't know
problems.
that you do run into problems because again, the uses that are already in that district, my argument is that the apartment greater than 10 is very similar to uses that are already there. So you have that scrutiny on anything. I don't know, what other parcels. I do know that I shouldn't say I do know. I do expect that office space is not going to be in demand.
That is our
And
problem.
that's what those buildings are.
Yep. Yeah, we just go right ahead, jump right in.
So I think we're about 10,000 housing units low in the Burlington area. So I tend to lean towards any, you know, even if it was your appeal, you know, to build housing. And I'm just wondering, how many units do you think you could get? What would the price point be possibly? And then would you think at all about coordinating with Winooski? Because Winooski is, you know, creating a gateway there, you know, a huge project. Would you think, or do you think your clients would think about coordinating with them to kind of?
Yeah, I don't think they'd have an issue with it, and anything greater than 10 units is gonna trigger Act 250, and Winooski as a direct abutter there would be part of the process regardless if they wanted to be. So even if the owners weren't. As far as the other questions, they haven't gone there on any of that. You know, obviously the good thing about commercial is it's got municipal water, it's in the sewer core, it has sewer right there, it's on bus service, so it's
Yep.
well suited for residential use.
Yep.
Right now, I can't tell you what each floor is. I mean, basically, if you took each floor and, you know, once you take out hallways and stuff and used 1,000 square foot per unit as the low or the high number as far as units, that would, you know, that I could certainly come up with a
No, yeah.
high-end number.
I didn't
but-
mean to put you on the spot.
Yeah.
I'm just really concerned about our housing shortage in Vermont and especially in this area,
yeah.
so.
Yeah, and the goal is not necessarily to fill the housing need. That's a secondary thing. I think the goal is you do have commercial properties that these two buildings, the one is still pretty active, the one to the north, with, you know, Dennis has one floor, I think still, medical might have one floor. And those type of uses, the other building was mostly general office, and I think the general office are the ones that are having a harder time coming back or never will come back to the level they were. I mean, my office today, I had one guy out, and it's unusual that we don't have at least one guy out for some reason, and they can work from home.
You don't see, excuse me, you don't see any other trends for the commercial use out there for the future for buildings like that?
The trend that I see that, well, mini storage is certainly a trend.
Sure.
But it's kind of going back, it seems like it's reversed back to the building with the overhead door and 1,000 to 3,000 square feet that, you know, that the plumber needs. And in some cases, it's a downscale from what they currently have. So we do a fair amount of commercial, and those are the two uses that we've been working on lately. Other than, you know, you still get some large industries. We've done everything up in the Saxon Hill area. You've got Reinhardt Foods and
Sure.
a lot of those type of uses up there that are big users, but they're putting in the huge warehouse buildings.
Right.
They need the, you know, what this parcel, what the High Point Center is not conducive to. It's not conducive to reuse on anything like that because it's set up as an office. So there's no loading docks. There's none of that.
Right.
It would basically be, do you change the facade, and then it's internal changes. And, you know, otherwise you wouldn't notice.
Yeah.
And the fundamentally thing that was wrong with High Point Center when it was done, I can say that because I didn't do it, but it received about I think it was a 26% shared parking bonus. And then what went in was office, and Libby's Blue Line Diner, and even without that footprint that wasn't filled, when it was at capacity, there was always parking issues because they were like useless. You don't do shared parking when you have
Yeah.
all office.
Right.
But the footprint that is left, the last approval on that, I did the last approval on that footprint. It never happened, but that was approved for a 4-story extended stay hotel. And then Jim Antel and Skip Farrell bought it because they wanted to control the whole High Point Center. So the building never happened. Parking hasn't been an issue for about 10 years now, but residential isn't gonna coincide with the office space that's still there, so it would work good for shared parking.
It's extended stay, not a thing.
Extended stay could be a thing again, but it was approved, and the owners of the rest of High Point Center didn't want to see it, and purchased that footprint.
Gotcha.
Was that in 2017?
Before I think it was before 2017. Probably closer to 10 years ago.
Yeah. So we still run into the same problem, unfortunately. Even though this is from 2017, we're just firing up again. We're just getting started, really. We're still looking at finishing the Mounts Bay thing, especially with the sewers going.
Yeah.
So I think we're still at the point where, as Rebecca stated, we will get in depth. We wouldn't do this just as a throw-on for one property. We'd study it all. That's just the way we've been doing it regularly. So it would take us some time. Not that it's not a bad idea to study, but
So the comment on time is just, you'd be delving into the whole commercial district to see, okay, what could happen out of this.
exactly.
Now,
That's how we've,
How necessary is that unless the majority of the board doesn't like the idea of apartment buildings greater than 10?
And Rich,
You
it also has to work with our town plan.
mhm.
If it affects our town plan, that means a whole look again at our town plan. That's another big tackle for us.
Yeah, the town plan talks about zoning changes, which to me is, if I'm coming in on a R3 zone, R1 zone, I'm asking for R3 zoning. I don't personally see adding a use as a conditional use. Zoning it is a zoning change, but in the context of town plan, I don't think that's what the town plan is talking about. So
Rich.
that's-
So specific to this district, that language is up there. It doesn't just talk about no zoning changes. It specifically says no extension of residential uses into that zone. So I think it's very specific, without getting into the merits of whether it's a good idea.
Sure.
I think that the plan itself is very specific, and if you did want to make these changes, you really should go back to the town plan process.
Correct.
DHCD would probably require you to the first time you submit your changes to your regulations and they see this contradiction.
Yep. That's one of the reasons we had the town plan and spent so much time on it back in the day. Unfortunately, it has to grow. Everything has to move with the town plan, and then the next time around, then we make all changes. As you know, nothing's simple. I wish I could say it was. I don't. Now, are we going to make that decision on this right now? Is that all right? Everybody,
Or do we put it off?
That's up to you guys. You could save them for the end, you could
you could
do
save them
them
for
as
the
you go,
end?
you could save them for another meeting. It's,
I'm just curious if everybody's on board. Go ahead.
Yep.
This is our first round with this type of
Yeah.
format.
So I am very concerned about housing shortages. There are people that are homeless that are gonna be in a month on the street. And again, Vermont is way, behind in housing. I mean, it's costing Vermonters a lot of money for rent if they can even find a place. So my thinking has shifted since we did the town plan, that there's a huge need. And I do wonder if we should look at that again, even if it means looking at the town plan. This isn't, gonna go away in a year. I know there was a bill that I think we're waiting to see if the governor signs it. I don't think he's gonna sign it. I think he's gonna veto it, but it would expand options for infill, for housing, for residential. If I knew you were, or your partners were going to put in some residential units in there, I personally, I'm just one vote, but I would be personally much more interested in the project. And
Well, there's certainly interest, that's why it started in 2017. I don't know of any timetable and how much resources do you spend until you know that, you know, that there's something on the other side. I mean, I did read that, and I'm just reading it again. It talks about rezoning mostly, you know, so that's where, you know, I told them back in 2017, it's not worth going in for a rezoning. It's not worth doing this, it's not worth doing that. This is not that. So it's an attempt at trying to make it pretty simple, in my opinion.
Mr. Schechter, what do you think?
We have some rules and regs for reasons, and part of it is no residential and commercial. And we do have to look at the town plan and everything. It's not like we can put a rubber stamp on it. We also have to look decide if we do this, what is going to happen to other places as well. It's not like we can just go, yeah, this is a great idea, and yes, housing is a problem, but do we want it in commercial places? Will it be a fit?
Right. Absolutely. You think?
I've heard what I've said.
Yep.
I think this is something that we need to table and review it at a later time as we focus on a couple other things right now.
Yeah,
I agree.
you agree?
Mm-hmm.
I think I have to agree with that also. I think we're not ready there.
Yeah. When you do take it up, when you say table, I mean, that could be a year, could be whatever.
Correct.
You'll get back in touch with us.
Correct.
Or
That's exactly what
just
it's,
keep
yeah. This format we're doing tonight, this is brand new.
Yeah.
So we are actually getting our feet wet here with you, making sure you're getting at least an answer right now
Sure.
to where we think we want to be.
Yeah.
So you're right, this could be a year, we would get in touch with you to say, we're now looking at this closer.
We have time to look at it.
We have time to look at it, we'll have a discussion on it.
Okay.
So it's not a
Yeah.
kill.
And as I said, I mean, when you do, please look back at that March 22nd, 2017 letter, just on this comment. As I said, conditional uses in that district include halfway house, congregate housing, hotel, motel, extended stay, trade vocational schools, college, universities, all of which, in my opinion, are commercial residential uses. An apartment building greater than 10 is a commercial residential use. So it's not that there isn't residential uses in your district now, in this district.
Okay,
Thank you.
great, thank you.
Thank you.
So you would, just to confirm, you want to leave it on the list, that's the goal of the tracking number. So when we do look at it again, it's the
Yep.
same number, it's the same request, we'll just keep it.
Yep.
Does that sound,
Absolutely.
did you want to do any votes, or you're fine with just the direction? I don't think you need to.
I don't think we need to, I think we're good. I mean, if it gets to, we're all arguing about it, then we'll take a vote. At the
Okay.
moment, we're all shaking our heads in the right same direction.
Sounds good.
Yeah,
All right,
all right?
no motion.
No, we won't need a motion for that. All right, so we've got SR 2202 is next. If we have anybody on that one,
Patrick, I think that's you.
all right.
My name is Patrick O'Brien, and before I get started, I was raising my hand when I was listening to David, and I was wondering if you were going to take any public comment on his suggestion, so if I may just...
Absolutely, I'm sorry. I
Okay.
should have looked around. I'm not used to having somebody sit over here.
Okay, it's fine.
Yeah,
Just real quickly, this is not on behalf of SDR, this is on behalf of Patrick O'Brien.
Sure.
I'm a lifelong resident of Vermont and South Burlington, lived in Colchester for a while, and been in the real estate development world my entire career. And ironically, I'm familiar with the High Point Center because it's been for sale for a number of years for the reasons David outlined. And ironically, just last week, I was driving by there coming from Severance Corners, and I said, it's too bad that there's not, that residential is not allowed there. So it's just irony of me here tonight in listening to David. But more importantly than that is I do sit on an affordable housing committee in a neighboring municipality. And one of the things that we have recently encouraged the planning commission to do, and they haven't taken it up yet, but we're encouraging them to do that, is to look very closely at the commercial centers of their town. So some of these areas could incorporate residential into their zoning districts, even in some instances into the industrial zoning districts. And the reason is simple. As you mentioned, housing the need for housing for all income levels is at an all-time high. But just as important, if we can place employees close to their employers, it also does another thing, and that is it stops the need to drive here and there, et cetera. So when you do take this up, I encourage you to look at this change favorably as it relates to residential being in a commercial district.
Okay, thank you.
Now, my name is Patrick O'Brien. I'm here on behalf of SD Ireland. And as you know, this relates to the form-based district GD3. I have been with SD Ireland for several years, trying to help the development of two of the corners, both Sunderland Farms Community and Severance Corners. And several years ago, I approached the former planner and encouraged her or encouraged her to let us come forth to the Planning Commission with some recommendations and alterations to the code. We were met with, we think they're fine. But we kind of kept, my former coworker and I kind of kept the pressure on. And thankfully, throughout the years, as you may know, we have gotten one or two changes. And thank you for that. But it has become clearer and clearer and clearer as I've started the infrastructure at Sunderland and tried to develop the other quadrant, that there are just too many planning hurdles to overcome the way the current zoning is worded. And that's one of the reasons why the quadrant hasn't taken off as quickly as it has. As I understand it, what you're asking or what you're trying to figure out tonight is the importance of putting this on the agenda come late summer or fall. And I, for one, being lived my life in the world of zoning, think that that's not soon enough, but certainly if that's the time, we will be here to help you all work through that with a whole bunch of suggestions. And I'll leave it at that. I can answer some questions. But on a side note, I did receive an email this morning from Mr. Simon in regards to the northeast quadrant. And he was kind of asking me if I felt he should drive up and represent his request tonight. And I didn't. I said, well, that's your decision, but I certainly will do what I can to make them understand that if you don't choose to drive up, it certainly isn't a reflection of the need or his desire to get to be heard when the time comes. So I just told him I would say that. Don't take his not being here as not being important, because it is. We looked at that quadrant recently and decided that we were not interested because of the current zoning. And not only that, but our existing holdings. But unless you want that quadrant to stay open, something's got to be done. And hopefully sooner than later, again, because of the crisis that we are in. So I guess I'll answer any questions and.
Yeah, so definitely the growth center is important.
Yeah.
It's top priority probably after we finish off what we've started.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about that.
Great.
The whole idea and all the sewer that's there and all the time and effort that's put into getting that growth center took years and years. So now we're at the point where it is time to look at detailed things.
Yeah, that's
Make
great.
it move forward properly. I personally am concerned to make sure it does move forward properly, because I was at the beginning at some of this, and it's not being built as it was presented. And at the time, I've said it before, and I'll say it again, I don't know where the disconnect came from what we saw, what we told people we were gonna have built, to what we're looking at today. So I think for it to look at changes, there'll be a detailed look. And I think that's important. And so at the time, that'll again take effort and time. But I
Yeah.
do believe myself, it should be next in line.
Yeah, I believe it was, if maybe the first, or one of the first, form-based code districts adopted.
Yep.
And I think that we can learn through, and you have experience in your former position, and we have some experience developing in form-based code in other districts. And so I think that we've all learned a lot
Yeah.
in the last 10 years, and we can all put our collective minds together and, as you say, work together and make some adjustments.
Yeah, sure. Sarita?
I just made some notes when I was reviewing it. It looks like in April of '21, the members agreed to add a review of GD3. I wrote down in my notes I wanted to hear Rebecca's input on it.
Well, yeah, at the time, we were talking about the garage and the setback.
And the parking spaces, right? And the
Yep.
number of parking
Yes.
spaces, yeah. And then when I did the ABCD, it looked like, Kathy, that A and B were okay. That C, this doesn't conflict with this does not conflict with the town plan.
C being,
I'm sorry, when I went through the little
Sorry.
kind of.
oh, yes, so that's in the memo. You know, I don't think there's nothing in there that contradicts with the plan. In fact, it sort of aligns with, as Rich said, setting the growth center as the #1 priority for work,
Okay.
along with anything on East Lake Shore and, well, I think at the time, all of Lake Shore.
So I agree with Rick, that it will be a detailed look, because there are some changes that are occurring,
Yeah.
especially in the parking and number of parking spaces.
I think that some of the goals that I read earlier and that I would recommend is that if you're working on the form-based code, you take a look holistically and not do, and I think Patrick agrees with me, and I was talking with Mr. Simon, I think he agrees with me as well. You don't do one-offs, you don't to just do garages and come back next year to talk about on-street parking. It's the time to look at everything together, because they do feed into each other. And so this on the agenda is separated from number letter F, but they're really the same request, just different specifics within it. As Patrick said, I also talked to Paul, and I'll just address that when we get to that one, but.
And if I may, I'm not sure how like, for example, I have 3 or 4 requests. And hopefully when we do dig into this together, does it matter if the request is actually listed tonight? Does that preclude it? Okay,
No.
good. All right.
No.
Okay, great.
Was your concern mostly for these garage setbacks?
You know,
Or
frankly.
are you- Now that we're talking about,
The garage setback is certainly an issue from a practical standpoint. But ironically, one of the things that we would like to do is increase the number of units that we can build at Sunderland, which would mean that we probably would not be building 3-plexes and 4-plexes. We would like to build probably slightly larger building, maybe some 12-plexes. So I will still advocate to make that amendment from a practical standpoint. It may not be applicable to what we may or may want to do.
Tony, I know it's a bit of a detailed thing, but are you talking about the big block building again, or are you talking about?
No, well, this more specifically, it would be something in the middle, something just 2 stories tall, big enough so you can have underground parking that still makes financial sense
Okay.
and doesn't raise the cost of the, because what we're trying to do is, we'd like to get some for sale product out there, and we're trying to figure out a way where we can do some for sale product that isn't in 3 or 4 story buildings. And we have a similar product and we've built in other municipalities. And it's a very, very efficient land use because of the parking. You can put the parking underneath.
Up? What do you think?
I'm all good.
All good? No questions
Yeah,
on
no
this one?
questions.
No questions, all
Looking
right.
forward to it.
What's that?
Looking forward to a further discussion.
Sure.
So is this going to be affecting all 4 quadrants there in the growth center?
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that you'll have some recommendations as well from the DRB in some of the reviews where they have felt like their hands were tied and maybe that there were some better solutions. Bays come to mind.
Yeah.
Chat about
yeah.
bays. So I think it might be a soup to nuts look at that entire subsection.
And it's a good time for it, actually.
Yeah, it was,
Because you have one quadrant built out 3/4
Yeah.
maybe. You're starting on this one, and then we have Paul's on the other side, so.
yeah,
It's definitely, when we started with former base zoning, it was an exciting idea.
yeah,
We weren't sure till now,
of course.
so, yeah. So we're all nodding our heads yes for
Mhm.
the next supplement still.
When you say the next one, the one.
So we're still looking at finishing off Mounts Bay and fixing what we did in 43 to 44.
Right, so this
So
would be
45, and this would happen, we're hoping, we start that at the end of the summer.
Okay.
One thing we definitely get detailed, we'll go for a field trip this round. We'll get some
Fantastic.
hands-on. We'll make it right, or
Great.
try.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we're tabling this.
Tabling this till,
After
6
East
months.
Lake Shore.
all good? All good?
Thank
Yeah,
you.
all right. All right, so this one here is SR 2203 for David Hazelett. If
I
we have
don't
any-
believe David is going to be here.
Okay.
Um,
So you want to go
I
through it
spoke
for
with
us?
him ahead of when this was scheduled in April. I think his letter, I think he asked to just stand for itself. He's shared that his ask is in the spirit of being a good neighbor to a neighbor who is having an issue. He believes that this request might help clean the bay because of a sewer issue on the campground property next door. That's his driving force, I think, with the zoning change.
Sure. So at this point in time, we have sewers now.
Yeah, so this
But not
request
for
was
this
made
one.
ahead of the sewer vote.
Yeah.
This is on the other side.
He
Oh,
understands that.
He can connect.
Any?
That basin, yeah. I think
Yeah,
I
those
asked him.
properties would both the campground that is having the wastewater violation and the Hazelett property would be able to connect to the public sewer once it's,
They have to. Yeah, they
once
have
it's
to.
lined in.
So this one we can, unless anybody has any questions, we can
No, I
next
would
this
Yeah,
one.
and I think West Lake Shore, and LS1 and LS2 fall into the category of
Yeah.
statements about, we just did this.
Yeah.
I mean, when I was reading it, I was thinking, I didn't know even if we had to deal with this now that the sewer had been passed.
Yeah, I did connect with him to see if, because the original request was made before, the renewal of examination of it was after the vote. He asked for it just to stay on. He didn't see any harm in it, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure there's necessarily there's not a strong will for this.
I think I
on-
vote C on
his
this
part.
one.
See?
Yep.
So,
Decide not to pursue the requested
Did you say D or
amendment.
something? You said D?
C.
C.
We're
decide not
at
to
A, B,
pursue.
and C. We might as well use C.
Oh, that's like, yeah. I agree.
I agree.
Yeah.
Everybody agrees?
Yep.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. Next up, SR 2204, Elias Erwin, on behalf of Cody Rice. Hello.
I'm Elias, Erwin of Landmark Engineering and Design. And my partner Jamie Simpson, also of Landmark Engineering and Design. We submitted a zoning change request letter back in April. Has everyone had a chance to read that? Great, I'm glad to hear that. And then also, hi, we haven't met before. Do you have the copy available electronically?
I'm gonna scroll
I thought
down
maybe I'd
to
set up
it.
the easel. Was that acceptable?
Absolutely.
I believe you had a map as well.
We do.
So-
Several, that's right. Yeah, 3. Let's set up. Just give us a moment, please.
Oh, absolutely. Take your time.
Position it so it's visible on camera as well.
Would you like the letter up or the plan?
Whatever you suggest. We can start with figure 1. So we're representing our client, Cody Rice, who purchased an 86-acre parcel on Blakely Road. And figure 1 here clearly shows the location. There's about an 800-foot section along Blakely Road. This parcel is unimproved. Okay, it's currently undeveloped. The immediately adjacent to Blakely Road is just this small stretch here. And then this type of wing here that you see, this angled approach, is set aside for access or a future.
It's emergency access to I-89?
Yep, and a potential exit potentially of I-89, or to I-89 as well. So really that's the location. And then in accordance with your current zoning regs, and as you know, the zoning maps,
Just trying to pull it up, but
so the parcel is identified being almost right in the center of the map here. It's shown in yellow. Again, an 86-acre parcel, and it's currently zoned as agriculture. And we're just simply hoping, we're asking for your approval to change a portion of that property from agriculture to R1 or residential district 1.
We illustrated that on the next figure as well.
Yeah, sure. One thing I just want to mention though before we move on, I just want to mention that the subject lot is in fact kind of bound by other properties that are of the same zoning designation. And I made that clear in our letter to all. And so as you can see, what we're proposing is just a portion, the lower portion, can you see
I
that?
can't see that.
No.
Can you turn it?
Of course.
Any way to turn it? Great, thank
Of
you.
course, yeah, just the lower portion, the portion that's level, the portion that's somewhat flat, the natural boundary being an existing stream that bisects the property. And so we're just looking to modify 28.3 acres of that 86-acre lot.
And that's what this shaded. We've gone ahead and shaded this portion in to kind of illustrate how that would look with the rest of the zoning in the area.
Yeah, making it contiguous,
Exactly.
unified, and to eliminate spot zoning.
And the upper portion would remain agricultural.
Yeah, 57.7 acres of the parcel remaining unimproved or in the ag type jurisdiction or district.
So what do you envision for buildings here?
Well, we haven't explored that necessarily, but the intent is housing. I couldn't tell you how many, but single-family residences, duplexes, multiplex buildings, wherever that need is, we're trying to fill that void.
you guys see that a little better?
Yep.
It's the same graphic.
That's right.
Yep.
Yeah, one thing to consider, that goes with all planning is, we need to have the area available for stormwater treatment and for wastewater treatment. And we haven't, gone through the entire process of that yet. But that would also give an indication of what kind of impacts we would have on this revised portion of it's only 28 acres. You know, there's only a certain area that would really be amenable for development on that 28 acres, and the rest would need to be used for either access or stormwater treatment or wastewater treatment.
But we haven't gotten that far into
Exactly.
any of that yet. So,
Exactly.
and this property also borders agriculture too, on the back.
This is zoning,
Mhm.
yeah, this is agriculture
Yep,
as well.
that's right.
Yeah, that's also ag,
Right.
however wooded, right?
Yep.
Yep.
Some of it, but it does wrap all the way down to Poor Farm Road, which is now actively being used as ag.
Yeah,
in the back.
again, this would remain agriculture, this upper half.
Yeah, I'll move that map. I wanted to put that up there just real briefly to make another point, but.
And then, you know, something else to consider is that we have a very small portion that's actually adjacent to Blakely Road. That would be adequate to provide easy access onto this lower portion. And then we have a natural boundary that's right along this line that we've chosen, which is a stream that is easily dividable into two separate uses.
Which complies with the zoning regs as well, utilizing natural boundaries.
And how would you have access to the agricultural area then, if you make the front?
Well, we could explore potential easements or potential options within the deed. It could be reserved area. We'd be looking for your input as well as to how you'd like to see that ag property used. Currently, it's all wooded. It can be a little difficult to access. So from an agricultural purpose, maybe it's more appropriate for silviculture in ways.
But there could also be, you know, a separate access for agricultural purpose, you know, which is different than the residential access. You know, those could be divided. So we have different means of egress.
There's designated access.
That's right. You have designated residential portion and designated agricultural access. That would be through the property.
Yep. So what happened here was growth center. So when the town plan was made, all our focus was on residential and the growth center, leaving more open spaces. And that's why that land was, and at the time, nobody had any objections to that, to leave that open in agriculture. So to make that change would be a different thought process, considering we wanted to put more of the focus up above and leave this just for that reason, open spaces and hopefully active agriculture if possible. I realize it has not been used for that, but that's why it was left open at the time.
The lower portion.
That whole piece, all 86 acres.
Yeah, it was
And the
left open.
matter of fact, the top, that's all the way up, because that was a 101 acre piece,
Mhm.
that top all the way up has been left alone. It was bought just to be left open.
Yeah. Well, we thought, you know, it's a great opportunity for additional development. It's adjacent to I-89. It's the last undeveloped property on Blakely Road. Adjoining landowners have also gone through the similar zoning change, so it's good for them, it's maybe good for us. I don't, maybe that doesn't apply. And not to mention, the soils are good. I mean, yeah, we've done some preliminary research, but we haven't gone out there to actually look at and actually evaluate.
So they're a
the soils
little
actually.
rough on the corner. As you get towards the interstate, now you're talking swamp. Yep.
You thought, yeah, gotcha.
Yeah, that's all, other than that first piece you roll in there, everything on the left is swamp. You can't go down 2 feet and you hit water.
Sure, it
It's-
does get wet.
Oh, yeah.
Certainly. And then not to mention, there's quite a utility corridor through there too.
Absolutely.
Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So again, it just seemed to fit nicely what
Mhm.
we're proposing. It's not the entire lot,
Mhm.
just the area that would be most suitable for residential development
Sure.
to fill the need and to support the community and provide an important resource and a valuable commodity. It's a need. Housing is a need,
Yeah, sure.
for sure.
Preservation of the agricultural piece.
So, and we'll consider additional residential options going down the road.
Mhm.
If we can't qualify for R1, then we'll remain at R5 and we'll continue, or ag rather, and we'll continue other options.
What do you think?
I think it's one of those things where we take a look at it, at a later date, maybe supplement 45.
Have discussion? Yeah.
Just out of curiosity, how come you didn't ask the whole piece to be changed then?
We, again, just for congruency or continuity, for uniformity, we didn't want to ask for too much. We didn't feel the need, and plus we didn't feel as though it had that value, being all wooded and being elevated and pretty rugged terrain. It's undulating with a lot of exposed ledge. It might be difficult from a development perspective, or from an access perspective.
It wasn't that, just having this portion as the rezoned portion, just has an overall less impact of the parcel itself,
Yeah.
instead of putting 3 or 4 houses all over the entire parcel, let's limit it to one section that's easily accessible,
Yeah.
and then.
Somewhat level,
Yeah,
already open,
and maintain the.
divided by the stream. It just seemed to make sense. And it corresponded nicely with the surrounding residences or the zoned areas around it. I guess we could have, but didn't occur. to us.
Or you could come in 5 years and do that.
Sorry, say again?
Or you could come back in 5 years and ask for that.
The whole lot.
The whole lot, yeah. We felt this was appropriate.
Yeah.
Made the most sense at this time.
You think, Surya?
I just have a couple of questions. Like 5 years ago, I would not give up prime Axel for residential. Now, it's competing priorities. Open space versus housing, and housing is really weighing heavily on at least my priorities. But I'm just wondering, again, this is just thinking, could the other 57 acres, could that be set aside to stay agricultural forever?
Certainly discuss that with the client.
Okay, so that's a possibility.
Sure.
Just a possibility.
Sure. And the intent is for that to remain as ag. We're not asking for a zoning change in that regard. This is to remain zoned as is,
Right.
ag, that back portion. But whether or not it's to be maybe deeded or reserved in the future, or preserved rather, maybe that's something that we can discuss with our client.
Okay.
Maybe it's a give and take kind of thing, where.
So that's a consideration.
Yeah.
A possibility.
Maybe.
Yeah, I know, I'm just wondering if it's like, there's no way we can do that, or that is a possibility.
We would definitely consider it.
There are lots of tools that you would have, once you consider something like this, there are a variety of tools you could choose from. Everything from conservation subdivision design to TDRs to.
What about offsetting how much, was it for the residential, how many acres?
28 and
28.
3.
Like offsetting that with another parcel, ag parcel of land that would be set aside.
So, there are, that's basically how TDRs or transfer of development rights work.
Which
So-
we have not made use of in this town.
Yeah, it's a
And
very
we tried
weird
it before, and it
section.
gets very
Yeah,
complicated very fast.
it does.
Yeah.
Very complicated,
Yeah.
very fast. It's
You know-
very hard to make that equitable. I'll tell you
Okay.
right now. Yeah, we looked at this before, even for our own land, when we did agriculture mixed use.
I think if you were to approach this by starting with the town plan, looking at those areas that you would like to see increased residential growth, you could also start to consider in a very broad perspective what the trade-offs are, if any, and you could discuss them at the broad level via the plan. And then when you get back to the regulations, you would start to identify different tools, which may vary in different areas. But I wouldn't get into too much of the detail with you tonight, but there are a lot of options.
And even though,
And it doesn't have to be one size fits all across.
absolutely, even though we do want housing, we want to make sure we have quality housing of whatever we're doing. We're at the phase, we're building a lot of new stuff. In the growth center, again, we want it to be nice.
Yeah.
We don't want to just put anything up there.
Yeah.
And this project may be nice, but there is not even an idea yet for what to put. I mean, if you're just going to put a bunch of duplex condos out there, I personally would love to leave it as open land. You know, that's why we had it originally,
We
because
would hope that doesn't come into your decision.
I got it. But what I'm saying is that the reason we have open land
Yes.
is because once you build on it, it's no longer open land. And when we did our town plan, we tried to find certain areas, and that's a big deal.
Yeah, a lot
For
of
the
towns
state,
look
they're
at
all
the
about
exact
it.
opposite.
Yeah.
They're looking for affordable housing. They want duplexes. They don't
Right.
want the congestion or the impact.
Right.
They want the clustered housing. You know, you mentioned 5 years ago, it was decided to keep it open for its agricultural value or for agricultural use. What was that value then? Maybe you can tell me? I mean.
As far as the use, to have open land and be able to grow anything on it.
As to how it was farmed, how it was worked, where.
Back in the day, that would have been multiple, just like the farm we have up the street right now. You have a multiple use farm, the Maz property, and you have one across the bridge on the other side again with multiple crops.
But this
And
was
they-
never used as that.
Yep.
Yes, that's right.
Yes, it was.
Okay.
Yes, it was. It was used for both things, plus at one time when we had cow farms, it was used to grow crops for corn. Then it shifted over to the multiple use, so yeah, it had use. Yep. Actually, at one time, 2 different farmers used it. Yeah, the front and the back property. Yeah.
I mean, I'm not gonna speak for the client and what his wants or desires are at this time, because we weren't prepared to come with that information
Sure.
for you here. Because we're looking for an idea of, is this even going to happen or not?
Yep.
But at the same time, you know, this area really does lend itself to condensed housing. You know, it's not to say that it'll be 10-plex, you know, housing, but at the same time, you know, given the terrain that's there, you're limited by the topography, you're limited by the, you know, the wetlands, you're limited by the stream.
Site
Yeah.
features.
Yeah, exactly. So it's going to be a fairly condensed development,
Mhm.
you know, as far as the design goes. Again, like I said before, you know, you still have to have those other features, you know, for state permitting needs and stormwater and wastewater, so.
Absolutely. So,
Whatever that need is, we'll be looking to fill it.
right.
Yeah.
So we have R2 across the street. Do we have R1 down from this piece that they're talking about?
This is all R1.
Yeah, that's all R1, sir.
Right now, this is the ag portion of code.
It's not R1 across the street.
I always get lost in this map.
No.
That's not
This is
R1.
R2?
That's on the other side of the interstate. Like it or not,
Correct.
that's a barrier.
Yeah.
That
Yes.
doesn't
for sure,
match.
For sure.
And that's actually R2 across the street. Across the interstate, that is
Yeah,
also
That's
R2.
correct, the darker blue.
Right,
R2 is over here.
right.
and
So
R1
just so we're
Yeah.
understanding, to switch anything, the first thing we'd have to look at is continuity.
Of course.
So R1 might not match for 1, and for 2, we're going to look at spot zoning. So those things kind of come into play.
Absolutely.
And we don't want to get into something that we end up saying you can't do it anyways.
Right.
You know what I mean?
And that was the purpose of this figure that we created, was to show the continuity. You know, because
Yep.
right now, this act comes down and right to Blakely Road, and then, you know, adjacent to Maz's, and then this is all ag currently. But we're showing this portion that we're proposing as this
Mhm.
change, the zoning change, and to show this continuity and how that would look
Yeah.
overall.
Overall uniformity.
Yep.
And not to mention, and maybe you guys can speak to this more, but in looking through your rules and regs and the history and the previous decisions made, there were 2 adjacent parcels that also went through the same zoning change that we're currently requesting.
Off of Poor Farm Road.
I made mention of them both specifically in my letter, including the parcel identification numbers
Right.
and the landowners.
Mm.
So again, we just felt like we had a leg to stand on.
A lot of it's in the timing, that's no doubt. Growth Center is now coming up fast. And this is more town plan material. From my perspective, now we're gonna have a decision on that. So far tonight, we've been able to make a decision right now. So the thought,
So again, the competing priorities, you know, what again, I don't like taking ag soil away in open space, but since it's close to the growth center, and I feel like the conversation, I believe at the state level, I don't know what's gonna pan out with bills being signed, but it seems like the movement is towards more residential growth around growth centers, so people don't have to get into cars. You know, people don't, you know, can walk places. So, you know, the possibility for me is that it's near a growth center. you know, and, you know, I'm sure there'll be more commercial and, opportunities up at, Servants Corner. So again, this isn't like in the middle of, you know, a huge field that
Right.
isn't close to anything that people could access.
So your thoughts?
I'd like to learn more.
Okay.
I'd
So
like
that's
to hear
table.
more about
Okay.
how many units, what they would look like, and kind of hear what your concerns are.
Okay. Bob, what do you think?
I'm fine looking at it, but we have to wait a while, correct? We can't jump right in this?
That would be, yeah, that would be 2 supplements from now.
Yep.
For myself, we're gonna
So
address,
this one also has the town plan restriction about changes, so
it'd be a discussion.
again, I would encourage you to not take up a specific zoning change here without having amended the future land use map at the very least,
Mhm.
but also looking at, what sounds like you're building towards is looking at what are the future housing needs holistically across the town. You'll wanna do that, I think, as part of a town plan update, which you're not locked into your cycle, you can do that on your own timeline. Doesn't, you have 8 years to do it, you don't have to wait those 8 years.
We hope that the number of units and what the houses look like and what's proposed doesn't sway your decision. We just want that opportunity to present that to you.
Right,
We're just looking for the zoning modification.
right.
So again, we're not prepared to discuss that aspect of this project yet.
Yep.
But it is something that we consider moving down the road, and we'd be looking for your input.
Okay. So what are we thinking, Rebecca?
It sounds like we're on agreement that we want to table it.
We're not all in agreement, but we were the majority rules.
Huh?
So we're not all in agreement,
No.
majority rules.
We're
So
not.
no, that's fine.
Yeah.
I don't know, I personally think it's got time before we get into that, but I'm happy to table it. I have no problems with that. And it won't be for a while, unfortunately. Go ahead.
I believe, my sense is there's a lot of funding and grants that are coming, you know, to possibly help with some of these projects, help the town or the municipality. Is that something that you kind of keep up to date on in terms of opportunities for funding or grants?
Oh, absolutely, I mean, most,
Okay.
most communities, when they do a town plan update, are going to hire additional help.
Yeah,
I've written maybe 5 or 6 now, and almost always with additional help. They're a big undertaking, not necessarily in the writing, it's all about public outreach.
yeah. It wasn't about the town plan, it was
No.
more about the project. You know, that if the
State
town.
funding maybe?
State funding and
Sure.
federal funding.
Absolutely.
You know,
Yeah.
the ARPA funding, I mean, again, that's a short window, but I wasn't on
I mean, most of your
commerce or-
funding is gonna be to designated, so state designated areas, growth centers, village centers, new
Right.
town centers.
Yeah.
Right,
All of those state designations are where the priority funding is gonna go.
And the supporting infrastructure.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is
Okay.
outside of
Okay.
that, any
Okay,
of those designated areas, but,
okay. Just thought I'd
yeah.
No.
think about that.
So, this is, we want to table it, but this is new discussion is when would we look at it again? We wouldn't be able to look, would be a little more complicated. So now we're diving into town plan territory.
I agree with that.
And we wanted to take care of Growth Center on 45. 44 will take care of what we need to fix on 43.
Right.
So 45 Growth Center, that will not be simple. So we're talking about, hopefully, 46. And just so you have an understanding of where we're looking at.
Yeah, I'm getting
You're
a sense
talking
you're-
about a
you're
year.
weighing your workload and what's in front of you.
Exactly.
prior.
Because this will be another discussion
So what
on it again.
What I'll probably recommend you do, not specific to this project, is probably the first of the year, set a work plan. So when we get to, so this will get us through East Lake Shore, get us started on form-based code growth center. And then by the first of the year, you know, sit down, look at everything that you've considered up until then, look at how far you've made it on other projects, and set a work plan for that year. You may say, we're ready to take on the town plan. You may say, we're not, but you'll have a better idea, I think, by the first of the year. And I always encourage work plans. I think they help to set your focus, and they help me to understand where you want to go with with the limited time that we have. So I don't know that you would necessarily have to set a hard time for looking at this or any of the other ones you've heard tonight. You could say, let's evaluate.
Okay. So do we want to keep it, we decide every 6 months on looking at new requests?
Yeah, so I'll hold on to these, and when we sit down, you know, it's gonna be like slotting things in. We're gonna sit down in January, in early January, and say, here are all the things that you've sort of tabled for the year that you haven't quite ready to drop. And you get to, you know,
Yep.
you know, maybe we put all stickies on a board and you can move them around and,
Sure.
and figure out where your priorities lie, and
Can I
for anything that you
quickly-
haven't said no to
Right.
outright.
I like that idea myself.
That sounds
Rebecca?
good. Yeah,
Yeah.
I can work with
Bob?
that.
You had something, yeah, I thought you
I
wanted
did.
to.
I had a quick question, which is, you know, if you're going to table these requests and others up to a certain point in time, which I'm not sure when, but you might pool all these together and then look at them all together to see which ones make the most sense. Does it mean that the project that was the most furthest developed or the most information provided gets priority, or how does this
It would help.
continue?
I think what we're,
Right.
well,
Wouldn't say.
I think what we're saying is that if you're looking at priorities in the first of the year, the commission's gonna have to figure out if they want to take up a town plan rewrite. If you talk to any one of them after they finished the last one, they said, thank goodness we have 8 years.
Exactly.
So I think that's gonna be the big discussion. I don't know that it's about specific projects, other than that specific projects might be dependent on a town plan and what the appetite is
Yeah.
for
That is a good point.
a town plan update, which sounds like there's definitely some appetite. It's just, how focused is it? Is it just on housing? I don't know.
Yeah.
Right,
But-
things change.
And that was my
5 years.
question, was
Yeah.
basically, you know, would this project be overlooked perhaps because we came and we presented an idea versus we wanted 28 units or whatever that number
Sure.
might be?
Full proposal.
Right.
No.
So what I've shared in my notes that I think is really important to keep in mind is that anything that directly conflicts, any zoning change, any change that you make to your bylaw regulations, I'll not just call them zoning changes, has a statutory obligation to be sent to surrounding towns, to be sent to fill out a report. Part of that report also goes to the Department of Housing and Community Development. They look at that to make sure that any zoning change you make does not conflict with your town plan. You have to prove that in your report. You have to call it out on every little item. It gets really annoying. Reports end up being multiple dozens of pages long, because you have to say conflicts or meets. This commission can't send a report to DHCD that says this contradicts. It'll get sent back. I've seen it happen. And so if there's ever a desire to do something that's directly in conflict, and that happens. You write plans, things change, you change your mind, different commissioners, different select board members, but you have to follow that process and respect the people who followed the process before.
Sure.
And 2 years went into writing that plan, and if you want to change it, you have to follow that same public process. So I think the commission knows that. Most of you, all of you, maybe were involved in that at that time, and it's not a small undertaking, and it may very well be a worthy one. I don't know that the commission is prepared tonight to say when they want to take that up. In January, they might be prepared to say, absolutely not, yeah, maybe, but I think it has to start with the town plan. And it may be a valid thing, it may be ready, but we don't know that yet.
The difference with those other properties, just so you know, that was at the town plan time. The time frame was right.
Yeah, prior,
Correct.
yeah. So they
Yeah.
kind of slipped in, if you will,
You don't,
before the bell.
when you do the town plan, you're adjusting for this. Now, so the next town plan comes up, these properties are all looked at again, including this property. And you're right, at that time, you're back here saying, we have ideas, this is what we'd like to see,
Yeah,
this is the direction we'd like to go in.
yeah.
Whoever's on the commission at that time takes all that in, because we know the town plan is something again, it has to grow, like I've said before. It takes time.
Well, it's a
To
living
get-
document. It's
yeah.
going to change.
Yeah, and it takes,
And
you
as
look
these
at,
communities change, so
Yep.
do the town plans. I've seen
Exactly.
Before, Middlebury's done the same thing very recently.
sure,
So, it sounds like you guys are gonna table it. It sounds like it's something you're gonna consider further.
we will talk about it one more time in January.
Yeah, and I just, please, review that letter one more time.
Hmm?
Please,
Absolutely.
supported this.
Anything else, Sarita?
No, I think your question, Kathy, about housing, that would be helpful to know. I mean, I think the last time we talked about housing, I was, pleasantly surprised to hear that Colchester is kind of doing our responsibility in terms of, providing housing. So I'd be curious as to, where we are now and, the Burlington, the greater metropolitan Burlington area.
It's a very timely topic.
Yeah.
Okay. Rebecca, anything?
No, that's it. It's just anything affecting the town plan is a big thing.
Yeah. Bob?
I'm curious, how long has the person who owns the property have owned it? Is it recent purchase, 5, 10 years? Just curious more than anything
I'd
else.
say no more than 6 months.
Yeah.
6 months.
6 to 8 months, I believe,
I believe the previous owner owned it for.
All right.
Yeah, the previous owner had it for a long time, from what I understand, and maybe even pursued a similar zoning designation at one point also.
That's it.
And we're all in we're treading some new water ourselves here with some new documentation and figuring things out. Also, our meetings have been far and few in between over the last year and a half. So we were gonna try to get ourselves motivated to answer a lot of this stuff, but it is taking us a little time to get our feet wet and get back to the motions and getting things done, I think.
Unless you have anything else for us, I think we will be good.
No, I
You?
think just in closing though,
All right.
If this isn't approved, we're still gonna look to pursue to develop this parcel.
Absolutely.
So we'll be seeing this.
It still allows you, that, even as it sits now, you still have opportunities.
There are opportunities.
That's right.
But
Absolutely. we understand that.
we're considering this one.
Gotcha. Perfect. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you for coming in and spending some time tonight.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you, Kathy, Ann, for organizing this.
All right, so we're moving on. We have SR 2205 of Rich Gardner to request a zoning change. Come on up,
All right,
pick your favorite spot.
can I get a chair?
Absolutely.
That sounds great. I don't have any fancy displays.
All right.
Would you like this drawing up?
Sure, that's
Is this
great.
a good one to start with?
That's a
or-
good one to start with. Hi, my name's Rich Gardner. I'm the owner of this parcel on Mill Pond Road. It sounds like you guys have been talking about potential zoning changes quite a bit tonight, so I'm going to add to the pile. I own a rather large piece off of Mill Pond Road. Both to the north, the south, and west of the parcel is zoned R1. And if you've looked at the drawing that I provided, although it wasn't highly detailed, I'm really just looking to create a small sliver of the overall parcel that I own to rezone that piece so that I could build a few houses there. The size of the rezoning was really just to try to make it a little bit more consistent with what's already existing around it. A couple of points that I wanted to make. So I've read the town plan, and again, all the adjacent parcels to my piece are currently zoned R1. I've done some soil testing there. In the town plan, a lot of this area is described as having marginal soils. I'm lucky enough that the large portion of the parcel that I'm looking to rezone is sand. So it's beautiful soils. I already have a current wastewater permit in place for an on-site, typical, traditional septic system at grade. So it does lend itself to wastewater systems well, at least in the area that I'm looking to rezone. The back portion of the land is beautiful the way it is, and I don't intend to change that. There's also a description in the town plan of it being a relatively rural area and having rolling hills. That's to the north of my property. There's some topography there. You can't actually see any of the meadows or fields. On my parcel, the topography just doesn't lend itself to that, so you really don't get the feeling of rolling hills or meadows as far as the overall view goes. Whereas you do as you get a little bit further north on my parcel. What else did I have? Those were some of the biggest points I had, especially if you read the little letter that I drafted up.
How many acres again?
On deed, it's 97 acres,
Right.
but I think it's larger than that. But on deed, it's
Yeah.
about 97
And
acres.
you want to do 20?
20,
How many acres are we talking about for R1 again?
about 14 to 15 acres.
Okay, all right. I asked this before, I'll ask it again. Did you have any vision of what you wanted to build there?
I sure do. I'm Colchester resident, have been my entire life. I've never left Colchester. I actually have a single-family home that's permitted on this lot, which I will be hopefully starting in the next month or so. My intent was to create a small little neighborhood with a few houses that I could sell people, individual land, individual lots, so that they can own a very traditional single-family lot with their own home, mow their own lawn, plow their own driveway, plant their own gardens, and do all those things. I'm not really looking to touch the back portion of the parcel. I love it the way it is, but I'd love to be able to develop a very small neighborhood.
Okay. Question on that one?
No, it sounds like it's one of those things that falls into the rezoning and changing the town plan again, so.
It does.
Yeah,
Sounds
we're
like
running into
grouping it together with a couple others we've heard tonight. I'm hearing something different.
That is the problem we keep running into.
I know.
Go ahead, Sarita.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So for me, this is different for me because it's not near a growth center. You know, the other one's in a commercial center where people could walk, you know, or ride a bike or, you know, not have to get into a car and drive somewhere. The one we just heard about is again so close to a growth center. This would begin to, you know, start now taking away from our open space. You know, if we really want to condense housing and, you know, residential growth within our growth center and maybe allow some in the commercial space. This now, for me, spreads it out too far.
How close are we? Can you just show how close we are? And
Yeah, I think this one's closer than the one you just
This one's
saw,
actually
Yeah.
closer than the last one, to the growth center.
but they're
Oh,
both
okay. So
kind of in the
that's
same
good to
general
know.
area.
We're very close. There's actually a sidewalk. The Mill Pond condos
Okay.
there's a sidewalk that cuts right across there where we actually, Donna's Way is directly across the street. So there is connection to that sidewalk that goes right in front of the Mill Pond condos. We're right there.
Okay. Yep. I was having, for some reason, I was imagining you somewhere.
No,
Turn the zoning
Mill
maps
Pond's-
off,
Mill
they're
Pond's
awful
big.
busy.
Yeah. So, yeah, we're actually very close to the project that Ireland currently has
Yeah.
going. As we drive by, my kids always like to look at the
Yeah.
big.
So that makes a
vehicles that are
difference for me, yeah.
there. Okay.
So I've got to ask the same question. How long have you had this property? Just, I don't know why, but that's just something that we can.
So how long has it taken me to acquire this property?
Yeah,
Or how
or-
long have I had it?
How-
I've been talking to the farmer for years. I've owned the property for a year.
It's a nice location.
It's a great spot. Yeah, I've been talking to the farmer for years. Actually, I befriended him. He's still haying the backfields. You can't see them from the road. Actually, you can't see any fields from the road at all on this parcel, but, and I hope he continues to hay the fields. It's a pretty piece.
So this is between the village center and the growth center in that area.
Yes,
Well, we don't have a village center, but between the village.
yes, very close.
Yeah, if you want me to orient you to anything on the map, let me know.
No, I know.
You know they can get,
Yeah,
it's easy to lose the streets.
It
When you
is,
have enough
yeah.
parcel lines and
yeah.
zoning colors. So this is the Essex line, that's why stuff stopped showing up here. I believe that's one of the post office maybe? Or the postal distribution center maybe right there. And then
Exactly where it is.
as you're coming in here, that's Mill Pond here.
Right where the sharp corner is.
Yep.
Severance continues.
So you take the left, it's right there.
Getting better at my Colchester geography.
So we run into the same problem.
We run into the same
We
problem.
zoned this for the same idea at the time back in the day. And I was definitely one of the ones that don't want to do a master plan again. It's a lot of work.
So,
And at the time, because the farmer you had this property, he didn't want to change it.
no,
We went piece by piece to a lot of these, and they wanted what you bought for that reason. And putting one house in there was probably all it was going to be designed to do because of the land, right? At the time, for what it's zoned right now.
yes, unless I shifted gears and went with, which is allowed in that parcel, which would be a PUD.
Yes,
I could actually develop that parcel and still build around the same number of houses.
right?
It's just it gets away from people owning their own land, which then I end up with a project that probably I would try to make it look the same.
Yeah.
And would still do the same thing. It's just I'm not selling people their own piece of land, which
Yeah.
is what I would love to be able to do. I grew up in a neighborhood where my parents owned their own lot. I work in real estate. I sell, I own one of the real estate companies here in Colchester. And I'd like to create another neighborhood where people can, have their own little garden in the back and not have to ask their neighbors for permission to put up a shed or their
Right.
neighbors for permission to have a garden or do any of those things.
Is that really the case? I don't know. Call me. We'll sit down.
For an HOA?
No, PUD.
For how PUDs work, I don't think it prohibits you from creating lots.
I don't either.
It would allow me to create something that looks very similar, but I still would have the open space piece, which would give everybody else the access and rights to potentially the back portion, which is not really, I've worked hard to acquire the property, and I'd like to keep it that way.
I
Right,
don't
that,
not believe you. I'm just curious.
No,
Yeah.
Just curious how and why that works and if that's a problem.
I'm happy to sit down with you and chat.
I'm redlining a lot of things as I go, and if I have to add this
I mean,
to
if I can do something different with the PUD
my red line. So you're not
process, then-
necessarily talking about
then-
increased density, you're really talking about a small piece of how a PUD works, and I believe it's probably a conservation PUD required because of the
I don't-
ag land, is that what?
No, I don't think I'd have to, I don't think so.
Okay.
he could take everything that's there, but it has to be the whole parcel.
It's correct.
He can't pick a piece, that whole parcel is part of that PUD,
Yeah.
and he can build his houses. You could still build them the way you want,
I-
but you're gonna lose the ownership of the back, and that's gonna go into
That's right.
HOA or whatever you wanna call it.
Which is something that I would like not to have happen.
I understand that.
Yeah, I'd like to be able to tell Bob that he can continue to hay the fields, and I don't have to talk to
Right.
6 other neighbors
Yeah.
about Bob's permission to hay the fields.
Right, because we have a few of those larger properties in town, some up in the north
Yeah.
community.
To me, the traditional neighborhood just would fit, it would fit very well
Right.
there. And I'd like to be able to sell that
Right.
traditional neighborhood or.
So
have-
for you, to build what you want on a quicker time frame is the PUD. For us to change the zoning on this, time and a lot of effort.
Yeah.
Which doesn't say anybody here is against it, even we just looked at the property before you, but that will be the difference.
And what if I was able to pull out and go point for point with what the current, I know you said you have to submit a document to explain why this parcel went against what the current town plan was, or if I went point for point with that, because I did read the town plan, and I have walked through this. Again, there are a lot of points in the town plan that I think describe a lot of the parcels to the north, and the small piece that I'm looking to chunk off, there are a lot of points that it just doesn't fit within the town plan. I don't know if that would be helpful in moving things.
Yeah, I mean,
Sooner.
part of it, when I first read this town plan, you don't often see ones that very specifically say no rezoning, and this one says it, I don't know, I haven't done a count, but it says it a lot, and when I noticed that, it said a lot to me in what the town's thing, I wasn't here, obviously, when the last town plan was written, and it's a very strong statement when you see that, it tells you what the people who did write it were really feeling and thinking at the time, and it's a very, very strong statement that seems to want to protect that work. Obviously, things change, and so the plan changes with it, but when you read that, it's such a strong statement that it says, if you do change this, be very methodical and careful when you do.
The reason that is, growth center, again, I hate to keep banging you on about it, but the growth center was everything then. The state was all over us about the growth center. If we put a growth center in, you will not build anywhere else. You will shut down everything. I really wasn't on board with the deal, I'm gonna tell you at the time, but that's really what it was about. That's why you see no zoning.
That is important.
It's
So
all about open space, and
growth
that's a big
centers,
deal.
you have to accommodate, in order to keep a growth center and all of the benefits that go with it, you have to accommodate 50% of your growth in the next 20 years, right there. So you need to limit so if you look at the total number of units expected at Severance Corners, you have to make sure that you're not exceeding 50% of that in the entirety of the rest of your community. And so when you write the plan and you write the map, they're going to review that plan density, that planned use against that with the growth center.
That's
For better or worse.
I'm not looking
That's-
for a lot of units.
Yeah. So that's what they're looking at when you do a town plan. They're doing a lot of behind the scenes work too. There was probably multiple build out analyses
Yep.
that went into the potential growth in any of the future land use districts.
Yep.
And those numbers have to come out under 50%. So anytime you're changing that, you have to justify that in relationship to the growth center. They're tricky little things.
Yeah. So, what are we thinking?
Unfortunately, I think we have to table it till
Table it,
the first
see.
of the year, and
Look at it again? Yeah?
Okay, yes,
Still
I
on board?
agree.
Still on board? Yep. Go ahead.
So this is where, again, the competing priorities for me is, I'm thinking if you can do a PUD, you know what I mean, and give up some of your wish to give, to not have the restrictions on the open land. I mean, I think if it was me, I'd consider that instead of waiting.
Sure. No, and I realize I have two little kids, and I think my parents actually were some of the ones that developed the Mill Pond condos. My parents bought that land when I was 3. I actually ended up selling some of the units there, so I understand the timeframes that some of these can take and the life cycle that a town goes through. And sometimes things just need to move forward, and there's not enough. I realize time is important, but sometimes there's just not enough time to sit and wait, especially trying to time a market.
Right.
These developments, when you start planning them out and when you start developing them, it's almost like letting a bowling ball go and then having somebody move the pins at the end of it. By the time the development's done, if the market's not there to support the product that you end up building and the time, energy, effort, and money that you've invested in that project, from the developer side, if the market's not there to support the sales of those units, it can be catastrophic. And I've seen it happen, unfortunately, too many times. So yeah, no, you're right. I've considered all angles. My overall goal would be to hopefully have some direction in the near future, so that I could start planning and making adjustments. But I have also considered going the PUD route. That's just not my preferred route. I'd love to be able to control the back portion of that land. If my kid decides he wants to start a tree farm or have a vegetable stand, I'd like to be able to say, go for it.
Yeah.
There's your field. Go play. Go.
So you're a realtor, the market is pretty unbelievable right now for sellers. I'm just wondering, do you have any idea of when it's anticipated that that's gonna cool down a bit?
I wish I had a crystal ball. I can tell you right now in Chittenden County this morning when I looked, in a balanced market, we normally have around 800 to 850 houses available to look at in all of Chittenden County. We had 83 this morning, and that's in all price ranges from the seasonal camps all the way up to, we've got a few properties that are in the multi-million-dollar price range. I had a buyer consultation this morning, sat down with them. Their overall budget is about $300,000. In Chittenden and Franklin County, I had seven properties that they could look at. None of them were single-family homes or all condos or townhouses. There is a massive lack of available inventory. Some of that's also, you've got sellers that have properties that they'd love to move, but they'd be competing in the same marketplace right now, so they're staying home. They're choosing to stay in their house because they know that trying to find the replacement house is just not there. I mean, I'd be happy to come and chat with way more detail. Chittenden County is actually most of Vermont, but Chittenden County specifically has a significant lack of housing inventory, and there's not enough new housing starts to come anywhere close to satiate the need. That and overall building costs are through the roof.
Yep. Unfortunately, we've done some things right, because people definitely want to be here.
They
There's
do.
no doubt about
They
that.
do. I never left.
Yeah, right, me neither,
I'm,
right?
I'm a product of that. I
There you
don't
go.
want to leave.
Exactly.
I don't want to leave.
Yeah. So it looks like we'll table this one.
Okay.
So you'll have at least another shot at it again.
January?
January, looks like.
I would
Yeah, I
be
mean,
more
I
than-
don't know if January will be a specific discussion of each item. I think it'll be like, what is the work plan for the year?
Yep.
And does the work plan include coming back to some of these?
Right. Right, so you might not
It
have to
does.
come in for the shot, we'll get to you at that time. If we really
Yeah.
wanted to pursue it, right, we'll have a,
And I leave you fully able if before January 1st, if you guys would like to change your mind
sure,
and make adjustments, I'm open to that.
that's great.
I don't think we're going to be tackling the town
No, I
plan,
know.
though.
You guys have a lot of work,
Yeah.
and you have some exciting things that are happening,
Yeah.
which, I appreciate, and I
Yeah.
look forward to seeing Colchester continue to grow.
Yeah, we're catching up,
Yeah.
inch by inch. All good?
Mhm.
All good. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you again. All right. So now we have the SR 2206 of Paul Simon, and you want to take that?
Yeah, so Paul is quite a distance away. I left it up to him whether or not he wanted to attend.
Sure.
But I did let him know that, what the recommendations were, that the Planning Commission has expressed that the growth center is a priority, that it's probably the time to be tackling the form-based code because the issues have accumulated enough to take another look. We've got more experience. He sent me a short list. It's, as you can see, not very short.
That's what you sent us?
Yeah, this is his short list. I haven't gotten into the very specific examples of each of them, whether or not they're good ideas individually, but I think as a whole, it's the time to look at that entire subsection of the GD3 form-based code district. Lots of lessons learned,
Right.
We sit down, we write these things, we envision a nice big square plot of land with no topography, no natural resources, everything's a grid system, it's wonderful. And then you get out there in the real world and you realize, how do you have this frontage met when, there's a wetland that already takes up 50% of it? How do you have 80% frontage build out? The DRB is putting together a list. They've reviewed now they've had the experience of reviewing several buildings. Some things have popped up that even staff is scratching our head on and saying, I don't know how we solve this. I don't even know what we recommend you do to meet this standard. So I think we just look at it top to bottom. I don't know that it's something that's gonna require an outside expert. I think we know where the problems lie. And I think we can probably come up with fixes, provided, you're able to give the policy direction on it. I think we can find the language.
All right,
Okay.
makes sense.
Yeah, I wish I knew how long it would take, but we'll see. Hopefully I'll give you a better idea before we kick it off.
Yeah.
So who on the board was, I know it wasn't me or Sarita, was
The master plan?
part of the,
Oh, the form base?
Form base,
Yeah,
yeah.
I was there,
were
McCullough,
you part
McCall,
of the
yeah.
fundraise?
Tom
Alright.
McCallie,
So we got to-
McCauley was there.
okay.
Yeah.
Rebecca, were you part of it?
No,
No.
yeah,
Oh.
I wasn't either. I'd
No.
love to just, even if just the two of us came in for, some kind of training or
Yeah.
information
Well,
on
I think what communities around the state are finding is that a full form-based code doesn't really work. You look at hybrid codes, you look at form-based code lights, you look at what the general goal is and the overall
That's,
purpose of doing one.
and that's exactly why the trigger was pulled on
And you work
form-based
from
code
there.
at the time. There was only so much time. And again, this growth center had to be, there was always time frames on this growth center, when we had it done, how big it was. I personally would have did it from Mill Pond And he would have to come in for that all the way down to Blake to this building.
Mhm.
I thought that was the best case. Now we're running a sewer pipe right through here. We're
Still
exactly
can.
what it did back then, and this would have been a different look. But anyways, now where we're at, we were given X amount of time that you can only do so much work in GD3 and commercial
Yeah.
and residential. So form-based zoning at the time answered a lot of those questions. So we're at the perfect spot now to take a closer look at what we've got.
For what it's worth, I'm a big fan. You just have to be really careful with it, to not be so specific in design
Yeah,
Exactly.
that you lose the overall aesthetic.
right. Yeah. So we're just at this point. So we're on board, as a board, continue on, fix 43 with 44.
Yes, I
Yes.
am.
Yes.
And then after that, we'll discuss on the 45, and the Girls Center will be at least our priority next.
Yeah, so 44, East Lake Shore, and then the remands
Yep,
from 43.
correct.
45, well, there's some staff things we'd like to bring to you that we've noticed is problematic in the regs.
Okay.
Put those together. I think they'll all be fairly simple.
So that
but
sounds
still-
easy.
Yeah, I think they're really straightforward. They're policy, they're not just grammatical issues, but I think they're fairly straightforward where,
And everything we've tabled, we will be looking at the end of the year. At the end of the year. Yep,
We'll be looking at for our work plan.
our work plan. See if it's something we want to
yeah, and
tackle.
when you get to the work plan, you know, I think there's gonna be a list of other things that we'll give you to figure out if you wanna slot them in anywhere. I'm hearing a lot about signage, which hasn't been touched in a very long time. So some
Yeah.
business community is looking for changes there.
Yeah.
The impact of the sewer, does that impact anything?
No,
And
I
it's
think
pretty-
that,
the
I think that
zonings
East
are-
Lake Shore and West Lake Shore has really, that was gonna happen anyway, and I think that as West Lake Shore was done, it was done with the anticipation that there could be increased sewer there, so I don't know if there's any immediate changes needed.
Okay.
In 2-3 weeks, we'll talk about East Lake Shore. I think barring anything that is really concerning, I think that moves along fast. I think I've heard from you, we've heard a lot from people in the community as to what they want. It's just a matter of writing it and looking at it and talking about it.
All right,
Good.
good, all looking good.
So,
All right, so first thing we need is a motion for the minutes of May 3rd.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Second,
a second?
discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, Bob. It's all you. Next,
I make a motion to adjourn.
second.
I'll second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All right.
All approved.
But we
Yay.
just signed
We
it.
need to sign.